April 1945. The heart of Europe trembles beneath a storm of fire. The city that once symbolized Nazi power, Berlin, now lies in ruins. The sky burns red with artillery fire, the streets echo with screams and collapsing stone. And beneath this dying city, buried in the cold concrete of a bunker, sits the man who started it all, Adolf Hitler. Once a figure of unmatched power, now a prisoner of his own delusions. As the Red Army tightens its grip, the walls close in, and the final chapter of the Third Reich begins. This is the story of the fall of Berlin, the last days of Hitler, the end of an empire, and the moment when the world finally took its first breath of freedom. By the spring of 1945, Berlin was no longer a capital, it was a battlefield. The Allied armies had pushed through France and the Low Countries. From the east, over 2.5 million Soviet soldiers were advancing, hungry for revenge after years of unimaginable suffering. Hitler's once unstoppable empire was collapsing from all sides. Cities that had been conquered by the Nazis were now liberated, one after another. Yet, inside his fortified bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, Hitler refused to accept the truth. The situation was dire beyond imagination. The Western Allies, American, British, and Canadian forces, had crossed the Rhine in March. They were sweeping through Germany's industrial heartland, capturing city after city with minimal resistance. The German army, once feared across the globe, was now a broken shadow of itself. To the east, the situation was even more catastrophic. The Soviet forces, under the command of Marshal Georgy Zhukov and Marshal Ivan Konyev, had steamrolled through Poland and were now poised at the Oder River, just 40 miles from Berlin. The Red Army had suffered tremendously under Nazi occupation. Over 27 million Soviet citizens had died, soldiers and civilians alike. Entire villages had been burned. Women and children had been murdered. The survivors were coming now, and they carried with them a burning desire for retribution. Hitler was 56 years old, frail, trembling, his body wrecked by years of stress, illness, and drug abuse. His left hand shook uncontrollably, possibly from Parkinson's disease. His personal physician, Dr. Theodore Morel, had been injecting him with a cocktail of drugs, amphetamines, barbiturates, and even compounds containing methamphetamine, to keep him functioning. But his voice, though weaker, still carried the same fanatic conviction. He ordered his generals to defend Berlin at all costs, even as those generals knew the city was doomed. The military situation was hopeless. Germany had lost the Luftwaffe's air superiority. Allied bombers flew unopposed, reducing German cities to ash. The navy was bottled up in ports. The Wehrmacht, once 3 million strong, was now filled with boys, old men, and wounded veterans dragged back into service. Yet Hitler's orders never wavered: hold the line, no retreat, no surrender. On the surface, the people of Berlin, women, children, and old men, were forced into service. Boys as young as 14 were handed rifles and told to defend their Führer. These children, members of the Hitler Youth, were given Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons and sent to face Soviet T-34 tanks. Many had never fired a gun before. Most would never return home. The elderly Volkssturm, the People's Militia, were also called up. Grandfathers who had survived the First World War were now thrust into another nightmare, armed with outdated rifles and sent to die in streets they had once walked in peace. The Soviet artillery began its bombardment on April 16. In just a few days, over 2 million shells rained down on the city. Buildings crumbled. Streets became rivers of dust and blood. The artillery barrage was one of the most intense in human history. Soviet guns, lined wheel to wheel along the Oder River, lit up the night sky with continuous fire. The sound was deafening, a constant, rolling thunder that shook the earth and rattled the bones of everyone within 50 miles. The city of music, art, and culture was now an inferno. Berlin had been the cultural heart of Europe, home to Beethoven's symphonies, Einstein's theories, and the birthplace of modern cinema. The Berlin Philharmonic, the grand opera houses, the sprawling museums filled with priceless art, all of it was now under siege. Iconic landmarks like the Brandenburg Gate, the Reichstag, and the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church were damaged or destroyed. Fires raged out of control. Water mains burst. Gas lines exploded. And yet, in the bunker, Hitler still spoke of victory. He ranted about phantom divisions that didn't exist, armies he believed would come to rescue him. His once loyal generals could only watch as their leader slipped deeper into madness. General Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the armed forces, tried to reason with him. So did General Alfred Jodl. But Hitler would hear none of it. He spoke of General Walther Wenk's 12th Army, stationed to the west, as though it were a mighty force that could break through and save Berlin. In reality, Wenck's army was exhausted, undersupplied, and had no chance of reaching the capital in time. Hitler accused his generals of cowardice, of treason, of failing the German people. He screamed that if the German nation could not win, then it deserved to perish. This was the man who had once mesmerized millions with his speeches. Now, he was a hollow shell, clinging to delusions in a concrete tomb. Every hour, the Soviet news tightened. By April 21st, Soviet artillery shells were landing directly in the government quarter. The sound of gunfire was no longer distant, it was just blocks away. Civilians tried to flee, but there was nowhere left to run. Bridges were destroyed, rail lines severed. Every road led to chaos. Refugees choked the streets, desperate to escape the Red Army's advance. Women clutched their children, carrying whatever belongings they could. The elderly stumbled through rubble, many collapsing from exhaustion. Those who remained in the city hid in basements and subway tunnels, hoping to survive the bombardment. The Berlin U-Bahn stations became makeshift shelters, packed with thousands of terrified people. There was no food, no clean water. Disease spread rapidly. The smell of smoke, the sound of shells, and the cries of the dying filled the air. Hitler's propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, told the people that surrender was treason, that dying for the Führer was the highest honor. Goebbels, a master of manipulation, continued to broadcast messages of defiance over the radio. He spoke of secret weapons that would turn the tide. He urged Berliners to fight to the last breath. He promised that history would remember them as heroes. But deep inside, even the most loyal Nazis could feel the truth pressing in. The war was over. In the shadows of broken buildings, ordinary Germans whispered the same question. How did it come to this? Just 6 years earlier, in 1939, Germany had invaded Poland with overwhelming force. The Blitzkrieg, lightning war, had shocked the world. Poland fell in weeks. Then Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France followed. By 1941, Nazi Germany controlled most of Europe. Hitler's empire stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the gates of Moscow. It seemed unstoppable. But hubris has a price. The invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, Operation Barbarossa, was Hitler's greatest gamble. He believed the Soviets would collapse within weeks. Instead, the campaign dragged on. The brutal Russian winter claimed hundreds of thousands of German lives. Then came Stalingrad, a name that would haunt Germany forever. From August 1942 to February 1943, the bloodiest battle in human history raged in that ruined city. When it ended, the German Sixth Army was annihilated. Over 700,000 Axis soldiers were dead, wounded, or captured. It was the turning point of the war. From that moment on, Germany was in retreat. The Soviets pushed westward with relentless fury. The Allies landed in Sicily, then Italy, and finally Normandy in June 1944. The once invincible Reich had devoured itself. Hitler's dream of domination had turned into a nightmare, one that consumed millions of innocent lives. Above ground, Berlin burned. Below it, inside a dimly lit bunker 55 feet underground, Hitler's inner circle gathered in fear and denial. The Führerbunker was a claustrophobic labyrinth, thick concrete walls, stale air, and the constant echo of distant explosions. It was built in 2 levels. The upper level housed the kitchen, servants' quarters, and storage. The lower level, deeper underground, contained Hitler's private rooms, a conference room, and the quarters of his closest staff. The bunker was cramped, dimly lit by flickering electric bulbs, and filled with a suffocating sense of dread. Ventilation was poor. The walls sweated with condensation. The smell of diesel fuel from the generators mixed with the scent of unwashed bodies. This was the nerve center of a dying regime. The deeper the city fell, the more Hitler withdrew from reality. He spent hours staring at maps, moving imaginary armies across the table with trembling hands. His staff watched in silence, afraid to speak the truth. To contradict him meant risking his explosive rage, or worse. He no longer trusted his generals, accusing them of betrayal. Reports of the Soviet advance sent him into uncontrollable rage. His trembling hand slammed the table as he shouted orders that no one could follow. On April 22, Hitler finally broke. During a military briefing, when informed that his orders to General Felix Steiner had not been carried out, because Steiner lacked the forces to do so, Hitler erupted. He screamed that everyone had betrayed him, that the war was lost, that his generals were cowards. He declared that he would stay in Berlin and die with the city. For the first time, his inner circle saw him admit defeat. But even in defeat, Hitler's cruelty did not waver. He ordered the destruction of Germany's remaining infrastructure, bridges, factories, power plants, so that nothing would be left for the enemy. This scorched earth policy would have left the German people with nothing to rebuild their lives. Albert Speer, his Minister of Armaments, secretly defied the order. He later said, Hitler wanted Germany to go down with him. I could not allow that. Eva Braun, his longtime companion, stayed by his side, smiling, dancing to music in the bunker's corridors as the world collapsed above them. Eva Braun was a mystery to many. She had been Hitler's mistress for over a decade, yet she was rarely seen in public. She was not interested in politics or power, only in being near the man she loved. As Berlin fell, she chose to return to the bunker, even though Hitler had urged her to flee. She told friends, better to die here than to live in a world without Adolf Hitler. It was devotion, or delusion, taken to its tragic extreme. Others in the bunker included Joseph and Magda Goebbels, along with their 6 young children. The Goebbels family had moved into the bunker, fully intending to die there rather than face capture. There was also Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary and one of the most powerful men in the regime. Bormann was ruthless, paranoid, and utterly loyal. Hitler's personal pilot, Hans Bauer, remained as well, along with several SS guards and secretaries. Food was scarce. The air reeked of sweat, smoke, and despair. Meals were simple, canned vegetables, bread, and weak coffee. Wine and champagne were still available, relics of better days, but they tasted bitter in the shadow of death. Above ground, the Soviet army was only a few blocks away. The once mighty capital of the Reich was now nothing more than rubble, fire, and fading echoes of a doomed ideology. On April 28, Hitler learned of a betrayal that shattered what remained of his spirit. He discovered that Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS and one of his most trusted associates, had secretly attempted to negotiate a surrender with the Western Allies. Hitler was enraged. Himmler, der true Heinrich, loyal Heinrich, had betrayed him. If Himmler could not be trusted, then who could? He ordered Himmler arrested, though the order could never be carried out. Himmler had already fled. That same day, Hitler married Eva Braun in a small civil ceremony inside the bunker. It was a brief, surreal event. A city official was brought in to perform the service. The bride wore a black dress. There was no music, no celebration, only a quiet exchange of vows in a concrete tomb. Afterwards, Hitler dictated his last will and testament. In it, he blamed the Jews for the war. He blamed his generals. He took no responsibility for the suffering he had caused. He named Admiral Karl Donitz as his successor and instructed the German people to continue fighting. But the fighting was nearly over. By April 30th, Soviet forces were within a few hundred meters of the Reich Chancellery. Machine gun fire echoed through the streets above. The bunker shook with each explosion. That afternoon, Hitler said his final goodbyes to his staff. He shook hands with guards and secretaries. Some wept, others stood in stunned silence. Then, Hitler and Eva Braun retreated to his private study. What happened next has been pieced together from the accounts of those who were nearby. Around 3:30 p.m., a single gunshot was heard. Hitler's valet, Heinz Ling, and Bormann entered the room. They found Hitler slumped on a couch, a gunshot wound to his right temple. A Walther pistol lay at his feet. Beside him, Eva Braun was dead, a cyanide capsule having ended her life. The dictator who had plunged the world into war was gone. His body was carried up to the Reich Chancellery garden, along with Eva's. They were placed in a shallow crater, doused with gasoline, and set on fire. The cremation was hasty and incomplete. Soviet shells continued to fall. The SS guards who performed the task saluted and retreated back into the bunker. Hitler had ordered that his body never fall into enemy hands. He had seen what happened to Mussolini, captured, executed, and hung upside down in a public square for all to see. He would not suffer that humiliation. But his death did not bring peace. Not immediately. Joseph Goebbels, now the appointed chancellor, refused to surrender. He spent one more day in the bunker with his wife and children. On May 1st, Magda Goebbels poisoned her 6 children, Helga, Hilda, Helmut, Hold, Hedda, and Heidi, with cyanide. They ranged in age from 4 to 12. She told them they were being given medicine to help them sleep. Afterwards, Joseph and Magda Goebbels went up to the garden and took their own lives. The remaining staff attempted to flee. Some succeeded. Others were captured or killed. Martin Bormann tried to escape through the subway tunnels. He was never seen again. His remains were discovered decades later, confirming that he had died attempting to flee Berlin. On May 2, 1945, the Battle of Berlin officially ended. General Helmuth Weidling, the commander of Berlin's defense, surrendered the city to the Soviet army. Over 1.5 million Soviet soldiers had participated in the battle. Approximately 80,000 were killed. German military and civilian casualties exceeded 100,000. Berlin was a smoldering graveyard. On May 7, 1945, Germany signed an unconditional surrender at Allied headquarters in Reims, France. On May 8, Victory in Europe Day, celebrations erupted across the world. In London, crowds filled the streets. In New York, confetti rained down from skyscrapers. In Moscow, soldiers embraced and wept. The war in Europe was over, but the cost had been unimaginable. Over 70 million people had died worldwide. Entire cities had been reduced to ash. Families had been torn apart. Cultures had been obliterated. The Holocaust had claimed the lives of 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, Romani people, disabled individuals, political dissidents, and countless innocents. The world had seen the depths of human cruelty, and it vowed, never again. Berlin would eventually rise from the ruins. It would be divided, scarred by the Cold War, but it would endure. And in time, it would become a symbol not of tyranny, but of resilience, reconciliation, and hope. The fall of Berlin was not just the end of Hitler. It was the end of an ideology built on hatred and domination. And in the ashes of that fallen city, the world finally took its first breath of freedom.